It's a complete disaster. Hello, so I think we are live again, so apologies for that. We had something going on in the background and it was completely distracting and I couldn't actually focus very clearly on what we were doing, so we just had to clear that out, so I apologize very much. So today's talk, and sorry if I distracted you there completely, but I was distracted completely myself. So just things happening that happen in the background when you go live. So coming back, let's start again from scratch. So the 7 chakras, how can they help you in modern day times and what are they truly about? So basically, what are the 7 chakras? Let's start there. What are they? And then we can start to elaborate how they can work for you. So basically, from a tantric perspective, the human body is an energetic system of many different levels, and the physical body is just one of the energetic systems that we have. And most of us are just used to understanding ourselves as a physical being and having the mind and the emotions. And we don't really understand how that's all connected. With modern day times, there's an awareness that obviously our thoughts and our emotions are very much connected, and that has an impact on our physical body as well, energetically. So there are these multiple energetic systems to who we are as a being. And the 7 chakras are a very, very key part of the energy structure of a human being. And in modern day times, there are a lot of misnomers about what the chakras are and how they function. And if they actually even exist. Is it just something that people talk about? And I'm meant to perceive my chakras, and it's a little bit like the emperor wears no clothes. You know, people walking down the street talking about chakras, but nobody can actually see the chakras. Do they really exist? Is it something that's made up? Or is it just something that people with clairvoyance can perceive? So that leads to a lot of miscommunications. And the original teachings of the chakras come from the ancient texts of Tantra, and Tantra goes back 5,000 years ago. And the tantric teachings were developed by yogis that reached very, very high states of conscious awareness. And in those very, very high states of conscious awareness, they will be able to perceive the metaphysical structure of the universe and how it actually works and interconnects. So the word Tantra actually in Sanskrit means matrix or web. And therefore, what that's actually referring to is this very interconnected, very complex, very subtle structure of how the universe works and how the world works and how creation works. And in Tantra, what we'll say is that the human being is a mini version of the universe. So everything that's within the universe is within the human being, right? And in the universe, it's understood that there are kind of 7 levels of energy frequencies, or 7 levels of consciousness, if you like. And those are represented in the human body. Our way of tuning into those between our human body and the universe, the 7 levels that exist in the human body, is through these antennae called chakras, okay? So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background on this. I'm not going to go into detail because these are sort of more in-depth teachings that we do in the yogic classes we teach within the Tantra massage and the Tantra yoga classes. But what we want to understand is that the chakras are not something that's a theory or something that's very vague as a concept, or as the Vedantics would say, it's an illusion. You're thinking of it, therefore it is. You start to think you're perceiving it because you're thinking of it. You're creating it with your imagination. For tantric practitioners, the chakras are very, very real and very, very. You actually perceive them very strongly as energetic structures, and you feel them through things like vibrations, tingling, warming, like waves of energy that flow around those areas. So they're very, very real and perceivable to somebody that's practicing Tantra yoga. And therefore it also helps to know that there are many misnomers about how chakras function and how chakras work in the world today can be dispelled by yourself if you learn to practice it. So some of the misnomers are that the chakras, spin in the body. Some of them are that they follow the colours of the rainbow. Some of them are that they are sitting within the body themselves. So these are all misnomers, and we teach you much more in the actual class about how the chakras are, where they're located, and how they function. For the moment, all we need to know is that in the universe there are 7 levels of consciousness, or 7 key energy frequencies of consciousness, and these are represented in the human being. And the chakras, the 7 chakras that we know of, they basically act as the antennae that allow us to receive and emit these levels of energy consciousness. So what do we mean by consciousness? Let's go to that for a moment. What we mean by consciousness is a level of awareness. And it's a bit like having glasses on. So, you could turn around and say that somebody lives a very limited level of consciousness. They have a very primitive outlook to the world. In other words, they're wearing glasses. I'm using these as examples. And these glasses are really, really, really thick that they have to look through. It's like a fog and a haze. And they have a very limited perspective of what life is about and how to live life, and they are chained down by fears and doubts and insecurities. And as you change your frequency of consciousness, as you go up the frequencies of consciousness, it's like you're taking off one set of glasses and putting on another set of glasses. And those glasses are a little bit clearer, and you're seeing the world a little bit more truly for how it is, a little less more foggily. And therefore, as you gain more clarity, you feel more safe and secure because you understand why things are happening and how they're working, and you're perceiving it from this higher frequency, this higher energy. It's a bit like in everyday life. We talk about, especially when I was doing management training, we talk about, changing your perspective, the paradigm, shifting your paradigm. And that's really related to the level of consciousness, because when you change the way you perceive things, you're changing a level of consciousness. And one of the exercises that we used to do in business management was, especially for communication skills, when people were faced with a challenge that they found very, very difficult to deal with, especially with another person, we would do an exercise called changing perspectives, where you would look at the whole scenario from your own perspective and you would talk it out to somebody else. Then you would go and stand in the shoes of the other person and you would talk out the situation from their perspective, and then you would step back as if you were the observer that had no invested interest, and you were looking at it from a much more wider perspective. You weren't tied into the limited perspective of one person coming from what their needs were, or the limited perspective of the other person coming from where their needs were, but you could actually look at the bigger picture, a higher perspective, and therefore actually come up with a better solution. So once you actually stood in the position of the observer, you were able to see a better solution for the situation that actually could result in a solution that benefited both parties and could let you move forward. So it's a little bit like that. You're raising the consciousness to the observer, but each time you're looking at it from a higher and higher level, and therefore you can see better solutions to how you deal with the situation. So that maybe helps a little bit with the awareness. And the more that we become self-aware, the more that we are conscious about everything we do, then again, the more we expand our consciousness, the more we are able to perceive things from different angles and therefore find better solutions for ourselves, is another way of thinking about this as well. So if we're changing this, the way we see things and the way that we do things, the way that we see things or perceive things, then we change the way that we do things. And if we change the way that we do things, then we get different results, okay? And the results then reinforce the way that we see things. So it's a little bit like having an optimist point of view or a pessimist point of view, as I was talking about in one of the earlier chats. If you see things very negatively, you kind of reinforce that negative response from the world by the way that you behave, maybe defensively, maybe aggressively, maybe with a bit of victimhood, needing to be rescued, and the world responds in that way, and that reinforces your idea that the world is a difficult and hard place. Whereas if you actually look at the world as having plenty of opportunity and abundance, and your glass is more half full than half empty, then the way you behave actually opens more doors for you and creates more opportunities for you, and therefore that reinforces your belief that the world is a very, positive and optimistic place. So it's a little bit just setting the set of glasses that you're choosing to look at the world out of. So this is the kind of thing that we mean by perspective and awareness and consciousness. And one of the practices that we normally do when we develop mindfulness in people and organizations is we say, start to do everything that you do mindfully, even starting with brushing your teeth, becoming aware of how you brush your teeth and what's going on in that moment, and just being very fully present of everything that's happening, how you make your cup of tea, how you eat. And it's actually been scientifically proven, if you bring conscious awareness to what you're doing, it provides much greater benefit. So actually, if you eat your food, instead of watching the TV and shoveling it down, if you watch the TV, if you sit and just eat your food and you're present with eating the food and you're aware of the flavors and you take your time to chew the food and to appreciate the food and actually offer appreciation for it, it actually has a much more powerful impact in releasing nutrients and well-being for your body. So again, if we change the consciousness and the awareness of how we approach everything in our everyday lives, we can bring much more benefit to us than if we're doing things from a more unconscious way of doing things, a more asleep way of doing things, a lack of presence in what we do. So the 7 chakras basically relate to these 7 kinds of consciousnesses, and I'm just going to very briefly introduce them to you. So the very first consciousness is at the first chakra, the root chakra here, and this is all about having the ability to survive in the world around us. And it deals with 2 things. It deals with our fears of survival, self-preservation, and it's also what gives us the vitality, the life force to do things, to have the endurance, to have the stamina to do things. And then we come to the second chakra, the sacral chakra. And this chakra focuses on the procreation of the race, so sexual energy, obviously, and sexual emotion, sexuality. But sexuality is also about creativity. So it's also the center of creativity, and it's also the center of our emotions. So if we are in an emotional state and we are not very balanced in our emotions, we can have very negative energies. We can have jealousy, sadness, unworthiness, disappointment, negativity, anxiety, depression. All these things can be coming from there in a negative point. If we are more positive about that, we can actually access our creative potential, our sexual potential. We can be very good at socializing and interacting with people from this second chakra. So the third chakra deals with the consciousness, this one, the navel chakra just here. This deals with the consciousness of self-confidence. And it's actually the seat of the ego. And it deals with your ability to have determination, willpower, motivation. It's a bit of a leadership chakra where you can access the consciousness of leadership. In its negative, out of balance, it's about anger and aggression and frustration and irritation and dominance. So you can see there's a positive side to the consciousness and a negative side to the consciousness, whether that energy frequency is in balance or not. As we move up the way to the higher chakras, here we move from the ego. These 3 are ego bands. This is where all our fears and doubts and insecurities come from. And then we move up to the higher chakras, where actually they transcend the ego. So for most of us, we're functioning down here. Very few people are functioning from the consciousness of the higher chakras. Most of us are functioning down here from this lower consciousness. If we were to move our consciousness upwards into the area of the heart, this is true unconditional love. And in the state of true unconditional love, we have a huge amounts of compassion and tolerance and acceptance. There is no judgment at this level of this chakra. We're not competing. We're accepting things for as they are. We see the beauty in everything. We see the wonder of everything. And then we move to the next chakra up, the throat chakra. And this deals with the consciousness of space and time and of purity. So this takes a little bit more explanation because it's moving into a higher metaphysical realm. But it's also about your ability to express yourself with speech and sound. And then we move to the next chakra, the third eye, which is a very famous chakra. Everyone's kind of heard about this one. And this is known as your mental command center. This is where you have the ability to have laser-like focus and concentration and to see things for what they really are. So we go back to the example I had earlier when you're dealing with a problem. If you're caught in it, you have a very minimal viewpoint and you're caught in the fog of the situation and all the emotions set up with the situation that are aroused here in these lower chakras as our ego tries to protect itself. If we transcend to a higher perspective, then we have much more clarity about what we can do and we see the situation for what it really is, and we can see very simple, straightforward solutions. So the third eye helps us with that. Obviously, it also has a much higher metaphysical reasoning and consciousness. And the very top chakra, the crown chakra, this deals with spirituality. So this is kind of known as the gateway to God, really. And if you're believing in the whole of the universe being a creative life force, a creative energy where everything is interconnected in all ways, this is the point, this is the chakra that connects us to that level of consciousness, of the universal cosmic consciousness. So if we learn how to access these different energies and these different frequencies, and we learn certain laws of energy, certain universal laws of nature, and how to work with those with the chakras, then that allows us to actually harness these energies and to be balanced in these, especially in these lower chakras, to create balance and harmony here and to raise our level of consciousness, to live life in much greater ease with much greater grace, and to not be shackled or tied down or limited by our fears and doubts and insecurities that have come from our experiences in life and through our culture and our way of living. So if you actually understand this, you can start to harness these energies, these frequencies, these levels of consciousness, and apply them in your everyday life to bring much more balance and harmony into all of your interactions, into the way that you act in the world, and also to being with yourself and being much more at ease and comfortable with who you are, and not being fearful or feeling unworthy or having an imposter moment, or all the different doubts and fears that we know come into our lives on a regular basis. We can start to release that and live life with a lot more ease and grace. So I hope that that was a useful introduction to the 7 chakras. I do apologise for our start at the beginning, because you might not have heard what was going on in the background, but it was very distracting for me. So I apologise for that, and I hope you enjoyed this introduction to the 7 chakras. And if you want to know more, then get in touch. So alchemyofliving.co.uk is our web address, and we run various courses in introducing these teachings. Take care now and enjoy your day. Bye bye.